Welcome back, ninja community and persons that have just become ninja enough to view my materials for the very first time. In this video here, I'm going to be covering a few techniques on bostaff and a few techniques on the whip chain, or an improvised whip chain. Before I get into that though, I will go over my quality statement and disclaimer, mostly out of liability, mostly, and that of course is, the viewer understands my quality statement and disclaimer video, additionally agrees that this video right here could be treated as is with ballistic protection, which in short means I don't have a seal on it, therefore I don't guarantee the techniques and or your application of the techniques. And if you're watching this video with the intention of using any of this content in committing a crime, that is an additional crime. If you actually use any of my content in committing a crime, that is an additional crime. And of course the viewer understands that this is my intellectual property that I'm allowing others to view. Okay, so with the bostaff, and there's just a few more techniques on the bostaff than in my other videos. You should probably go and check those out first. With the bostaff, the only moves I will really add soon is these. Let's see. So in my other video, I covered some basic strikes that exist almost in every martial arts form out there. Just basic strikes. I also covered this technique here. Okay. I also covered a quick strike missing the head and coming around to trip someone. A few blocks. You should probably go check those out. The only one I'd really add would probably be this one here. And if your opponent had grabbed your weapon, is to simply punch them, right, as they have grabbed your staff. And that would just be a shot like this. And of course, if your opponent had grabbed or stepped in and grabbed, is to just simply come across the top and punch them. Probably also you could kind of almost give them the staff, like if they had grabbed it. If you push, usually someone is pushing into your strike. So before you do that punch across the top, make sure you give it a good push, as the natural instinct, if someone gets pushed, is to lean in to the strike, right? So again, this strike is a simple strike, but if your opponent had grabbed it, where its context is to, if they came in, tried to grab your staff by taking away the advantage you have with a very long weapon with reach, right? If they had attempted to do that, you give them a push with it to either push them back or prime them for the strike across the top. Now to defend that, of course, like once that happens, you'll probably want to take your staff back, okay? Because they're probably going to let go. Another technique with the bostaff, and I think I covered the rolls in the other video, but just a simple exercise to do is, if you're doing bostaff training, probably go check people who do tricking out. They're probably better at bostaff on the tricking. But this is a ninja tricking, is to do that trick where you push and then punch across the top. So let's see. And you can probably tell that this staff here is a little bit taller than it should be. The correct height that you would want for your staff would be within 3 inches above or below your own height. So I think that is all I'll cover on bostaff, I think. So I'll go to the next weapon, a chain weapon. There's some basic strikes, and if you don't have a whip chain, you could improvise a whip chain. They're doing some ninja arts and crafts on the spot, like just putting weight on the end, and you want it on the end, not in the center, right, as it will give proper weight distribution. So just a little bit of weight on the end. So if you've watched the video so far, you should probably hit like hard like a ninja and subscribe to my channel to be alerted for when I do videos on YouTube. And you can comment on this video. Okay, so you have basic strikes with a chain. Okay, you should probably start on a chain with this move where you do a stop at the arm, and prepping you to learn to do stops. And there's also a move to catch it and throw it back around, and there's basic figure eights and a catch. I break that down in my other videos for the whip chain. But if your opponent had closed the distance, taking away the advantage you have from a long weapon, right, that can typically do wraps, you could at that point treat it like it's more of a sash, right? As you could hold it a different way and still do strikes with it, right? Because the weapon is just an extension of your body. Don't forget, you still have the rest of your body, but you could still do strikes with it, right? You could even do some of the basic blocks, like these are real shinobi blocks here, right? As this is similar to an X block, blocking a kick. However, my weapons are still in the front, as I have not completely dedicated by turning to one side, as in a traditional style, a recognized traditional style's X block. So this right here, and of course the technique or movement is called, it salutes to the sun, flies across the sky, it salutes to the moon, flies across the sky, and it is ambiguous with just about every weapon. Usually it has to be slightly modified without drastically modifying the movement. And of course that same technique, if you were using a bostaff, would be very modified, as it is very different when you go from a weapon that typically can't be wielded one-handed to when you move to this kind of weapon. The technique is slightly modified without drastically modifying the movement. As you notice, the strike couldn't typically follow through. And I think the full name of the technique is it salutes to the sun and flies across the sky, salutes to the moon, flies across the sky. On this side, looks slightly modified without drastically modifying the movement. Again, this right here is like that. And on this side, looks like this. Okay. Again, like, comment, subscribe, share. Check out my other videos. Okay, now the same technique that typically blocks a high kick, if your opponent didn't throw a high kick, say they threw a hook, it's still applicable. You can still block a hook with this technique and follow through with a strike, typically landing at their throat or jawline. You want to hit just below the jawline, as that pressure point is very sensitive. This one here is very sensitive too. So, and let's see, on this side, again, if your opponent, if you were doing the technique unarmed, of the ninja poem, you're doing the technique unarmed, you go from what is called by real shinobi, you go from what is called the telling hands to the taking hands. And the taking hands would look more like this. The telling hands would look more like this. As if my hands are open, I am telling my opponent usually what to do, where to go, or what to give me. If I am taking something, I am going this way. Okay. If I move from a telling hand position to a taking hand, as my opponent has thrown a kick and I have caught the kick, or say they have thrown an arm with from that side would be a right hook. If they had thrown a right hook and I caught their arm and I moved to this position here, I am more likely catching, like grabbing, or grabbing in a different way. Depending on how it landed, it's typically going to catch them or trap them, typically, depending on where their leg or arm fell. The body will naturally move into where it needs to go, as the technique on this side is slightly different. I'll cover it in another video. So, moving back on to some more whip chain of like basic figure eights, right? Stopping, but coming back around. Catches and throws. We get into the overhead flail and a return. Right? It's done differently than nunchaku. And if you're going from nunchaku to chain, I highly suggest that you start with a rope with some weight on the end, because a rope is more forgiving than a real chain. Okay? And start with one. Even if you have like experience using double nunchaku, start with one chain. That's my advice. And if you're going to train with a chain, it's best to trade outside or around where someone can see you. And, you know, because the safety part here is very important. Like, if you happen to get the chain wrapped around your throat or you get yourself tangled up, you might want to make sure that somebody can either help you get loose or that they could actually call an ambulance for you, as you might be stuck there for a while. So, the overhead flail, of course I've heard that it was, like that technique was called the whip and nay-nay. I've been training in martial arts for a long time. I had no idea that was the whip and nay-nay. I had no idea until I ran across numerous martial artists that referred to that technique as that. So, here we go. The last technique, of course, would be you could work up to it from an overhead flail. It's done this way, and you catch at the legs, and you come back around. Now, one thing you can do is shorten the length of this chain in the midst of the fight. As if you have shortened the chain in the midst of a fight, say from a basic figure eight, and they step in closer, shortening the chain increases the speed and momentum. So just because you have lost the advantage of reach does not mean that you have lost the advantage of a chain, as a chain can still wrap up your opponent, especially at close quarters. Now, what I'll be showing you is more like the 0 to 4 feet threat range in more upcoming videos with a chain. I'll leave the longer range to other martial artists that are more well practiced on longer range with a chain. I will cover some kama kasori, but that's about it. That's my level of knowledge on a whip chain. It's what basically, or mostly, what I've already shown, plus the 4 foot to 0 foot threat range, and using it with a kama kasura. So, as ninja poetry is typically ambiguous with just about every weapon, some of the techniques, as the one I showed you before, as it salutes to the sun and moon, right, is not inhibited by a chain. If anything, the options I have, if someone had thrown a kick, is to trap the leg, depending on which way it came from, is just to simply trap the leg with the chain as I finish my opponent off. Also, you can still throw punches while using the chain, right? It's not that difficult. Okay. And of course, it's very important when you do almost any training, it's very important to wear boots when you train. Usually it's only applicable if you're training with Sai, but we'll say you can still make sure that you are wearing boots when you're training. Let's see, there are some moves that are ambiguous with a chain that are ambiguous with a nunchaku. As you have a diagonal strike, right? Right? And also make sure if you're going from nunchaku to chain that you already learned the moves to stop it this way, the various moves to stop it that way, as you could. And there's this one here. Okay. And that is also learning to do disarming someone who has a chain at the same time that you're learning how to use a chain. Okay, so again, like, comment, subscribe, share. Check out my other videos. I'm on Facebook under my artist name or my 10th ninja name, Mel-El. That's M-E-L-E-O. And I have an Instagram, but I'm not telling you what my Instagram name is. You'll just have to be ninja and go figure that out on your own. And of course, you can share my video with people who are ninja, but not with people who ought to be ninja, because they might accidentally learn something. So, until next time, stay ninja, my friends.